Have you ever wondered what would happen if Darth Maul was a dyad in the Force with Obi-Wan Kenobi? Today we are going to explore the galaxy far, far away to discover what would happen if the major events from the universe were altered. What if Maul became an Inquisitor? How about if Maul had revealed the truth about Palpatine? We will explore all these questions and more as we ponder. What if? What if Darth Maul created a secret Sith Order after Rebels? Darth Maul lay dying on the sands of Tatooine, his vision darkening as Obi-Wan Kenobi cradled him, whispering words of pity and sorrow. His quest for revenge had ended in failure, his legacy seemingly extinguished. Yet as his body grew cold, the dark side refused to release him. Maul's rage, his unrelenting hatred, kept him bound to the physical world. In the depths of his mind, he clung to an image, one last purpose. The Sith had wronged him. Sidious had cast him aside, discarded him as nothing. The Jedi had destroyed his people. The galaxy had never given him what he was owed. But if he was to die, he would ensure that death was only the beginning. The shadows reached for him, and he embraced them. Maul awoke gasping, his body trembling as the dark side coursed through his veins like fire. He was alive. But how? His surroundings were unfamiliar. A dark chamber lined with ancient Sith runes, the air thick with power. The Force pulsed around him, whispering secrets in a tongue older than the Republic. His shattered body was whole once more, but his connection to the Force felt different, stronger. Then he heard the voice. "You should not be alive," the woman said. Maul turned sharply, his piercing yellow eyes locking onto the figure in the shadows. She stepped forward, revealing herself, a Mirialan with dark red tattoos, her gaze cold and calculating. She carried herself with the grace of a warrior, and the dark robes she wore marked her as something more than just a survivor. "Who are you?" Maul demanded. "I am Darth Talira, and I have brought you back." Maul's mind raced. The name was unfamiliar, but the aura she carried was unmistakable. She was Sith, or, at the very least, something close to it. "You are no Sith," he sneered. "No, not yet." Maul studied her for a long moment before realization dawned. "You wish to become Sith, and you require a master," he said, the barest hint of amusement in his tone. Talira did not deny it. "The Sith are dead," she said. "The Jedi are in hiding. The Empire falls. The galaxy is without order." Her eyes gleamed. "I have been searching for knowledge, for strength. And I found you." Maul rose, flexing his fingers, feeling his connection to the dark side surging stronger than ever before. "Then you have chosen well," he said. "And together, we will forge something far greater than the Sith." Over the next several months, Maul and Talira moved through the outer rim like whispers of death. They sought out Force-sensitive individuals who had fallen through the cracks, those who harbored anger, pain, and hatred but had never been trained. A disillusioned former Inquisitor, a Mandalorian exile, a fallen Jedi Padawan who had killed his master in self-defense, a ruthless crime lord with latent Force sensitivity. One by one, Maul shaped them in the image of true darkness. They were not Sith. Not yet. The rule of two had failed. Sidious had ruled with secrecy, with deception. Maul would create something new. A legion. A hidden order. A cult of darkness that would spread through the galaxy, undetected until it was too late. And at its heart, he would be the Dark Lord. Their headquarters was built in the ruins of an ancient Sith temple, buried deep within the wastelands of a long-forgotten world. Here, Maul trained his followers, each of them bound not by obedience, but by strength. The strongest ruled. The weakest fell. The Order of Shadows was born. Maul was no fool. The galaxy was still under Imperial rule, and even as the Empire crumbled, there were eyes everywhere. He needed to operate in secrecy. Using his knowledge of the criminal underworld, he established networks within the Black Sun and the Crimson Dawn, ensuring that his order had influence over the smuggling routes, bounty hunter guilds, and corrupt Imperial officials. Then, he began his true test, his first strike. A Jedi had resurfaced on a distant moon, a survivor of the Purge. It was said he had gathered a small following, training them in the ways of the old Jedi Order. Maul smiled. He would test his new order against them. The massacre was swift and brutal. Maul led the charge himself, cutting through the Jedi with the precision of a predator. Talira proved to be a worthy apprentice, her twin sabers dancing through the battlefield like a storm of crimson light. The fallen Jedi was strong, but he was no match for Maul's years of experience. When the battle was over, only Maul and his followers remained standing. The Order had passed its first true test, and the galaxy would never see them coming. Maul had always known that the shadows could not hide him forever. Rumors of the massacre reached Coruscant. Sidious listened carefully, his suspicions growing. He had long believed Maul to be dead, but the whispers spoke of a red-bladed warrior, a phantom from the past. The Emperor summoned his most trusted enforcer. "Lord Vader," Sidious said, "you have a new task." Vader kneeled, awaiting his master's command. "There is an old enemy stirring in the shadows," Sidious continued. "Find him, and if it is truly Maul, extinguish him." Vader nodded. "It will be done." Maul, meanwhile, felt the tremors in the Force. He knew that Sidious was aware of him now, and he welcomed it. He would not run. He would not hide. If the Emperor sought him out, then the Emperor would see what true power looked like. Maul stood at the edge of a towering cliff, overlooking the valley below. His followers had spread across the ruins, preparing for battle. Vader's forces had arrived, elite Purge troopers, the last of the Inquisitors, and Vader himself at the forefront. The air was thick with anticipation. Maul smiled as Vader stepped forward. "I have been expecting you," Maul said. Vader ignited his crimson blade. "Then you know why I am here." "Of course." Maul took a step forward, his own saber hissing to life. "You serve a master who fears me." Vader did not answer. Then the battle began. Their duel was fierce, brutal, two titans of the dark side clashing in a storm of red light and pure hatred. Maul was fast, relentless, but Vader was a juggernaut, his strength overwhelming. Blades clashed, the ground cracked beneath their power. The ruins trembled as the two warriors fought, each trying to outmatch the other. But Maul had an advantage. He had spent years in the shadows, studying, evolving. He had no armor weighing him down, no limitations, and for the first time, Vader felt something he had not felt in years: doubt. Maul grinned as he saw it, and in that moment he knew he could win. The battle between Maul and Vader raged like a tempest. Maul's twin-bladed saber spun in an unrelenting assault, a crimson blur against Vader's iron defense. Every strike was a calculated feint, every dodge a lure to exploit even the smallest crack in Vader's technique. But Vader was no ordinary Sith. He was a force of sheer will, a being of relentless power. His saber strikes were like hammer blows, each one carrying the weight of a titan. Even with all his speed, Maul found himself forced back, step by step, as Vader advanced like an unstoppable war machine. But Maul was not afraid. He had spent years preparing for this moment. "You are not invincible," Maul taunted as he leaped away, landing effortlessly on a crumbling pillar. "You are a broken thing, a puppet, held together by the will of another. Vader's grip tightened on his saber. "You are the one who is broken," he countered, voice cold and unwavering. "You hide in the shadows because you are afraid. You call yourself Sith, yet you scurry like a rat." Maul laughed, twirling his saber in one hand. "I am no Sith," he said. "I am something greater." Without another word, he lunged. Their sabers met in a shockwave of red light. Maul twisted, spinning his blade at an impossible angle, forcing Vader into a defensive stance. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he deactivated one side of his saber, redirecting his momentum mid-air. The maneuver was so precise, so fast, that even Vader could not fully react. Maul's blade sliced into the shoulder plate of his armor, searing metal and drawing the faintest hint of a grunt from the Dark Lord. Maul grinned. Vader responded with fury. His free hand shot forward, the force gripping Maul's throat in an instant. With a single motion, he hurled Maul across the battlefield, sending him crashing through a series of ancient pillars. Dust and debris exploded outward as Maul tumbled, finally coming to a stop on the edge of the cliffside. Vader stalked toward him. "You cannot win," Vader declared. "You never could." Maul coughed, blood staining his teeth. Yet his grin remained. "Winning?" he rasped. "Who said anything about winning?" Vader barely had time to react before the trap was sprung. From the shadows of the ruins, dozens of Maul's followers emerged, sabers igniting, blasters primed. The remnants of the Inquisitors, the purged troopers, Vader's forces, were surrounded. Maul rose to his feet. "I do not fight alone," he said. And then the battle truly began. The ruins became a war zone. Red, blue, and green lightsabers clashed in a chaotic dance of death. Blaster bolts lit up the battlefield as purged troopers opened fire, only to be cut down by Maul's disciples. Maul himself engaged multiple Inquisitors at once, his movements fluid and unpredictable. He had trained his followers well, but they were no match for Vader's elite warriors. The Inquisitors fought with the discipline of Imperial doctrine, their formations tight, their coordination flawless. Yet one by one, they fell. Darth Maul, Maul's most promising apprentice, severed the head of the seventh sister with a single downward strike. A fallen Jedi turned mercenary impaled the fifth brother through the chest before being cut down himself. The battlefield became a graveyard, and the air smelled of burned flesh and blood. But amidst the chaos, the true battle continued. Vader was unstoppable. He waded through Maul's forces like a storm of death, his crimson saber a beacon of annihilation. Force lightning crackled from his fingertips, sending warriors flying. His grip crushed throats, shattered bones, left bodies lifeless in his wake. Even as Maul's forces overwhelmed the purged troopers, Vader remained untouched. He had become something more than Sith. He was vengeance. And then, through the carnage, Maul and Vader found each other once more. Maul struck first, his twin-bladed saber carving through the dust-filled air. Vader met the strike head-on, their sabers locking in a blaze of red fury. Sparks flew as the two warriors pushed against one another, neither willing to yield. "You could have been more," Maul hissed. "I am more," Vader growled, shoving Maul back. Maul twisted mid-air, landing smoothly before launching another assault. His strikes were faster now, more desperate. He knew he could not match Vader in raw power, but he had the advantage in speed, in precision. Yet Vader adapted. His movements became sharper, more refined. He predicted Maul's strikes, countering with brutal efficiency. What Maul lacked in strength, Vader made up for in pure, unrelenting pressure. Blow after blow, Maul's defense weakened. And then, Vader saw the opening. With a surge of the Force, He caught Maul's wrist mid-strike, twisting it violently. There was a sickening snap as bones shattered, and Maul cried out. His saber fell from his grasp, deactivating as it hit the ground. Vader did not hesitate. With a single, devastating strike, he drove his blade through Maul's abdomen. The Zobrek gasped, eyes wide with shock. He clutched at the hilt buried in his torso, blood trickling from his lips. Vader leaned in, voice a whisper. "It is over." Maul grinned, even as death claimed him. "You will never be free," he rasped. "Not from him. Not from me." Vader withdrew his blade, letting Maul's body fall to the ground. The Order of Shadows had been broken. But the words lingered, and for the first time in years, Darth Vader felt uncertain. The ruins were silent. The last of Maul's followers had either fled or perished. Vader stood over Maul's corpse, his mind clouded. Then, from the shadows, a hologram flickered to life. Sidious. His hooded form loomed over the battlefield, golden eyes piercing through the darkness. "Well done, my apprentice," the Emperor purred. "You have removed yet another pretender." Vader hesitated for the briefest of moments. Maul's final words echoed in his mind. "You will never be free." Sidious tilted his head. "Is something troubling you, Lord Vader?" Vader clenched his fists, the rage within him threatening to explode. But he could not. Not yet. "No, my master." "Good," Sidious said. "Return to Coruscant. There is still much work to be done." The hologram flickered out. Vader turned away from Maul's corpse, his cape billowing behind him as he marched toward his waiting shuttle. As he ascended the ramp, he cast one final glance back. The Order of Shadows had been erased. And yet, in the depths of his mind, he felt something stir. A seed of doubt. A crack in the armor of Darth Vader. Maul was dead. But his legacy, his words, would haunt Vader forever. Deep in the ruins, long after Vader's shuttle had disappeared into the void of space, something stirred. A faint whisper in the Force. A presence. A crimson glow flickered in the darkness. Maul's lifeless eyes stared upward, empty and unseeing. But the darkness was not done with him yet. Not yet. What if Darth Maul was a dyad in the Force with Obi-Wan Kenobi? For decades, the Force had whispered its truth, but neither had truly listened. On Naboo, when the Jedi Knight and the Sith apprentice first clashed, the air had crackled with something more than hatred. It had been a storm of destiny, two beings unknowingly bound by something greater than themselves. On Mandalore, amidst fire and ruin, as they crossed blades once more, the Force had screamed between them, pushing, pulling, entwining. And on Malachor, as Maul and Ezra stood before the holocrons, their energies mingling, the Force finally showed Maul what had always been. A dyad. A power unseen for millennia. A shared fate. Maul's yellow eyes widened with realization. This was why he could never destroy Kenobi. This was why fate had kept their paths tangled, why neither of them had ever been able to truly move beyond the other. Kenobi had felt it too, even if he denied it. And now, Maul would force him to see the truth. When Maul arrived on Tatooine, the twin suns burned like watchful gods in the sky. He had spent so long hunting Kenobi, so long preparing to kill him, yet now, standing on the sands that the Jedi called home, he felt no rage, only inevitability. He did not need to search for Kenobi. Their bond was too strong, their fates too intertwined. The Force guided his steps, leading him to the lone hermit's hut in the dunes. And Kenobi was waiting. The old Jedi Master stood still, the desert wind pulling at his robes. His face was lined with years of exile, yet his blue eyes remained sharp, wary. "Maul," Kenobi said, calm as ever. "I wondered when you would come." Maul exhaled. This was not like their past encounters. There was no fury, no blind hatred. "I know you have felt it," he said, stepping forward. "You have always felt it." Kenobi's fingers twitched near his saber hilt. "You've come to kill me." Maul shook his head. "No. Not this time." A silence stretched between them. The Force itself seemed to hold its breath. Maul took another step closer. "We are bound, Kenobi. A dyad. A connection unseen since the old ways of the Sith." Kenobi's expression did not change, but Maul saw the way his breath slowed, the way his stance shifted. Recognition. "Impossible. You know it is not." Maul's voice was almost a whisper. "You have felt it since Naboo, since Mandalore, since every moment we have crossed blades." Kenobi said nothing, but the truth hung between them like a storm on the horizon. Kenobi turned away from Maul, gazing into the distance. His mind was in turmoil, but the Force had never been clearer. If Maul spoke the truth, if they were a dyad, then their bond was more than just chance. It was purpose. And Kenobi had spent his life ignoring the purpose the Force had for him. He exhaled. "If we do this," he said, "Luke must be protected." Maul scowled. "You waste time worrying over a boy." Kenobi's glare silenced him. "I will not leave him defenseless." There was only one person Kenobi trusted with such a task. Ahsoka. She arrived on Tatooine days later, her white sabers at her side, the wisdom of experience in her eyes. When Kenobi told her of his decision, she was silent for a long time. "You trust him?" she asked, not looking at Maul. Kenobi hesitated. "I trust the Force." Ahsoka studied them both, then looked toward the homestead in the distance, the boy who carried Anakin Skywalker's blood. "I will protect him," she said at last. "But I do not trust you, Maul." Maul smirked. "The feeling is mutual." Kenobi and Maul left Tatooine that night. Together. Their journey took them to the heart of the Empire. Maul had spent years hiding from Sidious, never daring to challenge him outright. Not alone. But now, everything had changed. Kenobi was at his side. The closer they came to the Imperial core, the more Kenobi felt it, their bond growing stronger, more defined. He could sense Maul's thoughts without speaking, and Maul could feel his. It was both unsettling and natural. "I see you are finally embracing it," Maul remarked as they entered the underworld of Coruscant. Kenobi sighed. "I am accepting what must be done." Maul grinned. "Good." But Kenobi had also begun to see something else, something buried deep within Maul's soul, a wound that had never healed. And for the first time, Kenobi wondered, had their hatred always been real, or had it been something imposed upon them? Their presence did not go unnoticed. The dark side sensed them, a disturbance rippling through the Force, and on the throne of the Empire, Darth Sidious smiled. "So," the Sith Lord whispered to himself, "my apprentice's failures have finally come full circle." He turned to his most loyal servant, the black-armored enforcer of the Empire. "Lord Vader," Sidious said, "find them." Kenobi and Maul had fought side by side before, but never like this. As Inquisitors descended upon them in the depths of Coruscant, they moved in perfect unison. Maul's dual saber carved through the air with lethal precision, while Kenobi's single blade countered with patience and control. For the first time, Kenobi understood what it meant to fight as one, and for the first time, Maul did not feel alone. Together, they struck down the Inquisitors, their connection growing stronger with every battle. But the true test was yet to come. For in the shadows of the Imperial Palace, Darth Vader was waiting. The halls of the Imperial Palace were eerily silent. The air itself seemed to hum with tension. Kenobi and Maul stood at the heart of enemy territory, surrounded by the weight of the dark side. Every step brought them closer to their destiny. Then, the silence broke. The sound of mechanical breathing echoed through the chamber. Kenobi's heart clenched. A massive shadow emerged from the darkness, the crimson glow of his blade casting long streaks across the obsidian walls. Darth Vader. The Force trembled at his presence. Kenobi, the Sith Lord rumbled. His gaze shifted to Maul, his voice dark with disgust. "And you? The failure." Maul's grip on his saber tightened. "You speak as if you are not the greatest failure of all." Vader took a slow step forward. "You should not have come." Kenobi lifted his blade. "Perhaps. But here we are." Vader's saber ignited fully. "I will end this." And the battle began. Vader struck first. His raw power sent shockwaves through the chamber, the sheer force of his blows driving both Kenobi and Maul backward. Kenobi countered with precision, deflecting each strike, while Maul weaved through Vader's assault with predatory speed. For the first time, Vader fought two warriors as one, and he was struggling. Maul attacked relentlessly, his dual saber spinning in a crimson blur. Kenobi balanced the assault, striking at Vader's defenses with strategic precision. The two moved together instinctively, their connection in the Force guiding them. But Vader was still the most powerful being they had ever faced. A vicious backhand sent Maul crashing into a pillar. Kenobi barely ducked in time as Vader's blade slashed through the air, grazing his shoulder. The Sith Lord pressed his advantage, his strikes fueled by pure, unrelenting rage. Kenobi felt the darkness pressing in. He could sense Maul's anger flaring beside him. The dyad was being tested. The Force raged between them. Kenobi and Maul had never been allies. Their connection had always been defined by hatred, by the pain of past battles. But now, against Vader, that hatred could destroy them. Kenobi understood. Maul refused. "Give in!" Maul shouted, his voice raw with fury. "We are strong enough to kill him together." Kenobi blocked another of Vader's powerful strikes, his breath coming fast. "I will not become what I fight." Maul's rage burned. His movements grew erratic, aggressive. He could feel the power between him and Kenobi, but he wanted more. Vader sensed it. He struck hard, exploiting Maul's loss of control. A brutal Force blast sent Maul skidding across the floor, his saber clattering from his grasp. Kenobi barely managed to intercept Vader's killing blow. And in that moment, Maul understood. Kenobi wasn't fighting for power. He wasn't even fighting for victory. He was fighting for balance. Maul lay on the ground, panting, watching the battle unfold. For the first time, he saw Kenobi as something more than an enemy. The Jedi was not weak. He was free. And in that moment, Maul finally saw what the Force had been trying to show him. The dyad was not meant to destroy. It was meant to heal. With a roar, Maul reached for his saber, leaping into battle once more. But this time, his fury was controlled. His strikes were no longer fueled by rage, but by something deeper, by purpose. Vader faltered. He had expected brutality, but not unity. Together, Maul and Kenobi overwhelmed him. A perfectly synchronized strike disarmed Vader, sending his saber spinning across the floor. Kenobi's blade hovered at his throat. Vader stared up at them, his breath ragged. For the first time, Kenobi felt something strange in the Force. Regret. But there was no time to dwell on it. A presence darker than Vader loomed ahead. The Emperor was waiting. The throne room doors opened, and Darth Sidious sat in the shadows, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "How poetic," the Sith Lord chuckled. The discarded apprentice and the broken Jedi, standing together. Kenobi and Maul tensed. The Force trembled around them. Sidious stood. Lightning crackled at his fingertips. "You have come far," he said. "But it ends here." Without another word, he attacked. The room exploded in light and darkness. Sidious was beyond powerful. His speed unnatural, his strikes unpredictable. His mastery of the dark side was unlike anything either of them had faced before. Kenobi fought with the precision of a Jedi Master, his blue blade cutting through the storm of Sith energy. Maul moved like a shadow, his speed deadly, his strength overwhelming. But Sidious was laughing. "You think you are equals," he sneered. "I am the dark side." Lightning erupted from his hands, sending Kenobi and Maul crashing backward. The air burned with raw power. Kenobi struggled to rise. Maul was already on his feet, his face twisted in rage. But then, Kenobi felt it. The dyad. The Force between them. Not just their connection, their potential. "Maul," Kenobi breathed. "Trust me." Maul hesitated. And then, for the first time in his life, he let go. Together, they reached into the Force. And the Force answered. The room erupted in energy. Sidious's smirk vanished. The combined power of Kenobi and Maul surged, a perfect balance of light and dark. Their blades moved in harmony, their strikes precise, unstoppable. Sidious screamed. For the first time, he was not the predator. He was prey. With one final strike, Maul's crimson saber pierced the Emperor's chest, and Kenobi's blue blade ended him. The Sith Lord collapsed, his body disintegrating into darkness. Silence fell over the throne room. It was over. Maul stood in the aftermath, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. Kenobi placed a hand on his shoulder. "The Force has given us a choice," Kenobi said softly. "What will you do with it?" Maul looked at him. For the first time, he did not see an enemy. "I do not know," Maul admitted. Kenobi smiled. "Then let's find out together." And so, the two old warriors left. Not as Jedi. Not as Sith. What if Maul's Shadow Collective successfully overthrew the Republic? The Clone Wars raged on, but a third power had risen in the chaos, one that neither the Republic nor the Separatists had anticipated. Darth Maul, thought dead, had built an empire in the shadows. Mandalore had been his first conquest. Now, with the might of the Death Watch, the Pikes, the Black Sun, and the Hutts under his command, his Shadow Collective was a force unlike any other, and soon it would eclipse them all. Coruscant remained blind to the danger. The Jedi focused their efforts on the war with the Separatists, failing to see the darkness growing in the underworld, until it was too late. The first attack came swift and mercilessly. The Jedi Council sent Master Ki-Adi-Mundi to investigate reports of Shadow Collective activity on Mygeeto. What awaited him was a slaughter. Mandalorian supercommandos, clad in Maul's crimson-marked armor, ambushed the Jedi General and his forces. Mundi fought valiantly, his saber cutting through the Mandalorian ranks. But Maul had learned from his past failures. He did not fight alone. Savage oppress descended upon the battlefield like an unstoppable force. The Dathomirian brute tore through clones with terrifying strength, his raw power shaking the very ground. Master Mundi fought until the last breath, but in the end He was no match for two Sith warriors. His head rolled across the battlefield, the Jedi's light extinguished. And this was only the beginning. One by one, Maul set his sights on the Republic's greatest defenders. Luminara Unduli and her Padawan, Barriss Offee, were ambushed on Kashyyyk. A legion of Shadow Collective warriors surrounded them, their numbers overwhelming. Maul himself struck the final blow. With his double-bladed saber, he carved through Unduli's defenses, his speed and precision far exceeding the Jedi Masters. In her final moments, she gazed at Barriss. "Run," she whispered. Barriss did. She fled into the forests, but Maul's warriors hunted her down like prey. The Jedi were being eradicated. On Kamino, Shaak Ti prepared the clone defenses, believing that the greatest threat to the Republic was the Separatists. She was wrong. Savage Apprentice led the assault personally. His brute strength shattered the Republic's defenses. The Kaminoan cloning facilities burned. Shaak Ti fell in battle, impaled by Maul's blade. By the time the Republic truly understood the Shadow Collective's power, it was too late. Maul's forces were everywhere. Republic strongholds fell. Separatist-controlled planets were seized. The war was no longer between the Republic and the Separatists. It was between the Jedi and the Sith. And the Sith were winning. Desperation forced old enemies to reconsider their loyalties. With Maul's forces overwhelming the Outer Rim, both the Republic and the Separatists realized that they could not stand alone. A fragile truce was forged. Republic cruisers and Separatist battleships fought side by side, their commanders exchanging wary glances, their soldiers reluctant to fight alongside former enemies. But the alliance was doomed from the start. The distrust ran too deep. Republic commanders sabotaged Separatist operations, believing them to be double agents. The Separatists, equally suspicious, held back crucial reinforcements. Maul did not hesitate to exploit this weakness. He struck swiftly, targeting key Separatist strongholds first, crushing them before the Republic could intervene. Soon, the Separatists were no more. The Republic was next. The Republic's defenses collapsed system by system. Kamino had fallen. Mygeeto had fallen. Kashyyyk had fallen. Only the core worlds remained. Maul stood before a map of the galaxy, his forces tightening around Coruscant like a noose. But one obstacle remained. The Republic Senate still held power, and one figure stood at its heart, Senator Padme Amidala. If the Republic still had a soul, she was it. She was their last hope, and Maul would break her. A message was sent to the Republic Senate. A ceasefire. A chance for peace. Padme Amidala, ever the diplomat, saw hope in the offer. She did not know it was a trap. She arrived at the secret location, a neutral world at the edge of the core. The halls were silent. Then the recordings began. Holograms flickered to life, playing transmissions of Padme's capture, of her surrounded by Mandalorian warriors, of Maul's voice echoing through the chamber. And then, the message was sent to Anakin Skywalker. He saw the woman he loved, bound in chains. He heard her voice, pleading, desperate. Maul's voice followed. "Your Republic is doomed, Skywalker. But you can still save her." The darkness whispered. Anakin stood alone in his quarters, his hands trembling. The Hola recording looped again. Padme's voice. Her fear. Her desperation. Anakin clenched his fists. The Jedi had failed to stop Maul. The Republic was crumbling. If he stayed loyal to the Jedi, she would die. But if he helped Maul, she would live. The Republic would fall. But Padme would live. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Anakin Skywalker stood before the Jedi Council, his heart pounding as he delivered the information. "I've learned that Maul has been sighted on Naboo," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "This could be our chance to end his reign before it begins." Silence fell over the chamber. The council members exchanged glances. Yoda stroked his chin in thought. Dangerous, Maul has become. Deceptive, cunning. A trap, this could be. Obi-Wan nodded. Agreed. Maul wouldn't reveal his location unless he wanted us to know. Anakin clenched his fists. "That's why I should go. I need to be there." Mace Windu narrowed his eyes. "You are compromised, Skywalker. Your emotions cloud your judgment. I can still fight." "No," Obi-Wan said gently. "You must stay. If Maul has Padme, he'll be using her against you. That alone is proof enough that you cannot face him right now." Anakin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Yoda nodded. "Go to Naboo, Kenobi, and I will." Obi-Wan placed a reassuring hand on Anakin's shoulder before turning to leave. As Yoda and Obi-Wan departed, Anakin felt something twisting deep inside him. Something dark. The attack on the Jedi Temple was swift and brutal. Mandalorian warriors, Death Watch commandos, and the Shadow Collective's forces stormed the sacred halls, cutting down Jedi where they stood. At the front of the battle stood Anakin Skywalker. His blue blade clashed against Mace Windu's purple saber, their duel sending shockwaves through the temple halls. "You betrayed us, Skywalker." Mace growled, parrying a vicious strike. "I'm saving her," Anakin spat. "Maul promised me Padme would be safe." "Maul lies." Windu roared, forcing Anakin back. "You're being used." Anakin snarled and lunged forward, slamming his saber against Windu's guard. All around them, Maul's warriors had begun planting explosives throughout the temple. Anakin didn't know the details, but he did know one thing. Maul had given him the detonator. He had to end this. With a final, devastating push, Anakin sent Windu flying backward. Smoke filled the temple. Jedi bodies littered the halls. Then Anakin's fingers tightened around the detonator, and he pressed the button. Anakin stormed into Maul's throne room, his robes still scorched from the battle. "Where is she?" he demanded. Maul smirked, lounging on his throne like a king. "Ah, Skywalker, I see you've completed your task." Anakin's heart pounded. "Give her to me. Now." Maul rose from his throne, clasping his hands behind his back. "Oh, Anakin, you already have her." Anakin's breath caught. Something was wrong. Maul turned to a nearby holoprojector and activated it. The Jedi Temple. A caved-in prison cell, deep within its lower chambers. And inside, Padme Amidala. The realization struck him like a starship crashing into a planet. No. His knees buckled. His saber fell from his grip. Maul stepped forward, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You pressed the detonator, didn't you?" Anakin let out a guttural scream, his entire body trembling. The force around him spiraled out of control, waves of pure agony radiating from him. "You monster!" Maul chuckled. "Oh, Skywalker, you did this." Anakin's vision blurred with rage, grief, hatred, and then a burning pain pierced through his back. His body jerked forward. His breath hitched. He looked down to see a crimson blade protruding from his chest. Savage Apprentice stood behind him, sneering. Anakin collapsed, choking on his own blood. His vision swam as Maul knelt beside him. You had such promise, Maul whispered. But I never intended to share my throne with you. Anakin reached forward weakly, trying to summon his saber. But the world faded. The Chosen One was no more. The fall of the Jedi Temple sent ripples through the Force, and Palpatine felt it. Deep within his Coruscant chambers, the Sith Lord scowled. Darth Maul had won. He could sense Anakin's death, the loss of the Jedi Temple, the Republic's crumbling foundation. This was not how he had foreseen things. Sidious clenched his fists, rage burning in his yellow eyes. He had spent decades crafting his plan, and now another Sith had claimed the galaxy. No, this was not the end. He would wait, plot, manipulate from the shadows. One day, he would return. Far from Coruscant, on the once peaceful world of Naboo, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda stood amidst the ruins of Theed. The trap had failed. Maul had underestimated them. But Coruscant had fallen. Yoda closed his eyes, listening to the Force. Obi-Wan's mind reeled. He had felt Anakin's death through their bond. The boy he had trained, the one destined to bring balance, gone. What do we do now, Master Yoda? The ancient Jedi turned his gaze to the stars. The Force, calling to us, it is. Obi-Wan frowned. Calling. Yoda nodded. To the unknown regions, we must go. The unknown regions? Yoda's eyes glowed with deep understanding. There, answers we may find. A path forward, the Force shall show. Obi-Wan swallowed hard. He knew that Maul's rule had already begun, that bounty hunters would soon be searching for him. But if the Force was guiding them elsewhere, they had no choice but to follow. And so, with heavy hearts, the last of the Jedi departed into the unknown. From his throne on Mandalore, Maul looked over the galaxy he had conquered. The Republic had fallen. The Jedi were dead. The Empire never came to be. He had won. And yet, as he stared into the darkness of space, he felt something. A disturbance. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. The Shadow Collective reigned supreme. For now, what if Darth Maul killed Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine in Rebels? The twin suns of Tatooine hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the shifting dunes. A hooded figure walked the barren wasteland, his presence a whisper in the Force. The years had been unkind to Obi-Wan Kenobi, his once proud form now shrouded in solitude and regret. He had been waiting for this moment, sensing the storm that had come to find him. From the darkness of the night, red fire ignited. Maul stood before him, his horned silhouette illuminated by the crimson glow of his double-bladed lightsaber. "Look what has become of you, Kenobi," Maul sneered. "A rat hiding in the desert. How pathetic." Kenobi remained silent, shifting into his stance, his blue saber humming to life. Maul lunged first, a blur of red and rage. Kenobi parried, moving with precision, each motion calculated, honed by years of discipline. Sparks flew as their sabers clashed, lighting up the desert around them. They danced through the sands, but Maul was different this time. He had learned from his past failures. There was no blind rage, no reckless arrogance. This time, he fought with measured patience. Then, the moment came. Kenobi, believing Maul would fall for the same feint that had once felled Qui-Gon Jinn, adjusted his stance. Maul saw it, anticipated it. As Kenobi made his move, Maul twisted at the last second, avoiding the strike entirely. His saber cut through flesh and bone. Obi-Wan staggered back, his lightsaber slipping from his grasp, its blue glow vanishing as it hit the sand. He gasped. His hands gripping the wound maul had struck across his torso. "You!" Kenobi whispered, dropping to his knees. Maul leaned in, placing a clawed hand on Kenobi's shoulder. His voice was quiet, pathetic. With a swift motion, he ended it. Kenobi collapsed, lifeless. The Jedi's watch had ended. Maul turned to the homestead in the distance. He could feel it, a power greater than anything he had sensed before. His lips curled into a sinister smile. "The boy!" Luke Skywalker screamed as the electricity surged through his body. His wrists and ankles were bound in durasteel restraints. His body slumped forward in exhaustion. The dark chamber of Maul's hidden lair was cold, the air thick with the scent of ancient death. Maul stood over him, his expression unreadable. "You will break," Maul said simply, his voice almost a whisper. Luke had lost track of how long he had been here. Days, weeks, months. He had no way of knowing. The pain was endless. Maul never spoke of why he had taken him, never explained why he inflicted such torment. He only demanded one thing. "Use your anger," Maul whispered, pacing around him. "Hate me. Hate this world. Hate the Jedi who abandoned you." Luke gasped for air, shaking his head. I don't even know what you want from me." Maul knelt beside him, his yellow eyes piercing into Luke's. "You are powerful," Maul said. "I can feel it. You do not need words. You need pain." Luke's body convulsed as another surge of energy crackled through him. His mind felt like it was unraveling. Visions flashed before his eyes. A man with a red blade. A woman's desperate cries. Fire. His rage boiled. Something inside him was changing, and Maul knew it. The boy was beginning to break. Luke no longer recognized his own reflection. The bruises and scars that marred his skin were nothing compared to the storm that raged inside of him. He had spent months in Maul's grasp, his body battered, his mind twisted and reshaped. The Jedi, they were myths. Fairy tales meant to comfort the weak. Hope, that was a lie. Only strength mattered. Only power. And now, he had it. Maul stood before him in the training chamber, his crimson saber humming. "Again," he ordered. Luke lunged forward, his own weapon, a newly crafted red lightsaber, clashing against Maul's. His strikes were fueled by raw aggression, his movements faster, more precise. Maul watched him, testing him. The boy had become something greater than he ever anticipated. A warrior forged in pain. A weapon with no master. Maul spun, delivering a kick to Luke's ribs, sending him crashing to the ground. "Is that all?" Luke roared, pushing off the ground with unnatural speed, his blade moving like lightning. He struck Maul's saber, forcing him back. Maul grinned. "Good." Luke panted, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His rage was becoming easier to control, to channel. Maul circled him like a predator. "You are ready," Maul said, deactivating his saber. "It is time for us to claim our destiny." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" Maul's expression darkened. "There is a power in this galaxy that must be undone. A relic of the old Sith Order, one that has ruled through deception and lies. It is time for Darth Vader and Sidious to fall." Luke hesitated at the name. Vader. He didn't know why, but the name clawed at something buried deep inside him. Maul stepped forward, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "You and I will bring an end to their reign. Together, we will reshape the galaxy." Luke clenched his fists. He had nothing left to lose. The air on Dathomir was thick with dark energy. Luke stood at Maul's side as the two overlooked the ruined temple of the Night Sisters. The spirits whispered, their voices like wind through dead trees. Maul closed his eyes, extending his arms. "Mother," he whispered. A chilling wind swept through the temple as green mist swirled before them. A figure materialized, twisted and spectral. "Mother Talzin." "My son," she whispered, her voice laced with ancient power. Luke felt the darkness surrounding him, seeping into his bones. It was intoxicating. "We have come to seek your gift," Maul said. "A weapon to destroy Vader and Sidious." Talzin smiled, her ethereal form shifting. "The Sith are blind to our magic. But I have foreseen your victory. You will unleash a plague upon them, one that will rot them from within." She raised her hands, chanting in an ancient tongue. The very ground trembled beneath them as green flames erupted from the temple, forming a writhing sphere of raw energy. Luke stepped forward, his eyes locked on the unnatural power before him. "It is done," Talzin whispered. Maul turned to Luke. "You will deliver this to Vader yourself." Luke clenched his fists, feeling the magic coursing through him. "It will be my pleasure." Vader stood at the edge of the Imperial Palace, his eyes fixed on the darkened horizon of Coruscant. He had felt something, a disturbance, a presence. And then he saw him. A hooded figure approached, stepping through the shadows. He stopped a few feet away, his breath slow and controlled. Vader ignited his saber, its crimson glow illuminating the darkness. "Who are you?" Vader demanded. Luke slowly lifted his hood, his once youthful features were hardened, his blue eyes now cold and filled with darkness. "I've come to kill you," Luke said simply. Vader hesitated. There was something familiar about him. Luke threw his hand forward. The magic plague Talzin had forged erupted from his palm, striking Vader square in the chest. The Sith Lord staggered back, gripping his armor as the dark magic seeped into his body. Pain, more than he had ever felt before. His limbs trembled, his breathing became labored. The magic was consuming him from the inside, eating away at him like fire. Luke ignited his saber. "Now you know what it feels like to be powerless." Vader fell to one knee. He looked up at Luke, his vision swimming. "Who are you?" Luke hesitated for only a moment. Then he plunged his blade through Vader's chest. For the first time in decades, Darth Vader screamed. And then he was gone. The Sith throne room was silent. Sidious sat upon his throne, his yellow eyes fixed on the two figures before him, Maul and Luke. "So," the Emperor said, his voice smooth, "the Phantom Apprentice returns. And you have brought a student." Maul smirked. "No, my lord. I have brought your executioner." Sidious cackled, rising from his throne. "Fools! You believe yourselves strong enough to challenge me? You are nothing but failed remnants of the past." Luke stepped forward, his lightsaber igniting. "We'll see about that." The room exploded into chaos. Lightning crackled from Sidious's fingertips as Maul and Luke split apart, dodging the attack. The battle ignited with a fury unlike any before. Maul struck first, his dual saber spinning in a whirlwind of motion. Sidious countered effortlessly, his speed inhuman. Luke followed, his strikes swift and relentless. Sidious cackled as he weaved between their attacks. "You think yourselves powerful? You are children playing with fire." Maul leapt, slashing down. Sidious caught his blade with the force and flung him aside. Luke pressed forward, his strength raw and untamed. He drove Sidious back, their sabers clashing with violent energy. For the first time, the Emperor was on the defensive. Maul recovered, lunging once more. He and Luke struck in unison, their combined strength overwhelming Sidious. The Sith Lord snarled, unleashing a blast of lightning. Luke absorbed it, channeling it through his saber. Sidious's eyes widened. Luke smiled. "You're afraid." With a final surge, he struck. His blade sliced through the Emperor's chest, burning through flesh and bone. Sidious gasped, his body convulsing as the dark energy within him erupted. The Emperor of the Galaxy fell. His reign was over. Maul turned to Luke, grinning. "It is done. We have won." Luke remained silent. Maul stepped forward, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "The galaxy belongs to us now." Luke's grip tightened on his saber. "You're wrong," he whispered. Before Maul could react, Luke drove his blade through his back. Maul's eyes widened in shock, his breath hitching. Only the strongest rule. He twisted the blade. Maul gasped one last time. Then, he was gone. Luke stepped forward, looking out at the stars beyond the throne room window. The Sith were dead. The Jedi were no more. And now, there was only him. What if Darth Maul was revived by Palpatine? The galaxy had forgotten Darth Maul. Buried beneath the sands of Tatooine, his broken body had withered away, his soul lost to the darkness. 4 years, he remained trapped in the void between life and death, his spirit lingering in torment. But Darth Sidious had not forgotten him. Deep within the heart of Exegol, the ancient Sith Lord sat upon his throne, his decayed hands woven together in thought. The Sith Eternal chanted in the shadows, their voices merging in a dark symphony. Before them, a swirling mass of crimson energy crackled in the air, pulsing with raw, unnatural power. Sidious closed his eyes and reached out through the Force. "Rise, my apprentice." Far across the galaxy, beneath the burning twin suns of Tatooine, the sands trembled. Something stirred beneath. A skeletal hand burst from the earth, clawing toward the sky. Then another. A muffled, guttural scream echoed through the wastelands as a figure dragged itself free from the grave. Darth Maul gasped as he emerged, his body trembling, his vision blurred. He collapsed onto the sand, his mind reeling. Memories flooded back. The battle with Kenobi, the searing pain of his final defeat, the cold embrace of death. But he was alive. Sidious's voice slithered through his mind. "You belong to me once more." Maul clenched his fists, his head pounding with whispers of loyalty, forced loyalty. His master had revived him, and now he had a purpose once more. It was time to rebuild. Maul did not return to the galaxy in grand spectacle. He moved like a shadow, whispering through the cracks of a broken empire, stitching together the remnants of what was left. He traveled to the Outer Rim, where the New Republic's reach was weakest. The Empire had fractured after Endor, leaving warlords to fight among themselves for scraps. Maul found them, one by one, offering something greater than petty power struggles. A future. He stood before them, his presence alone enough to silence entire rooms. The warlords knelt, their fear evident. "You serve me now," Maul declared, "or you perish." Not a single soul dared to defy him. His influence grew rapidly. The Shadow Collective, thought to be long gone, was rekindled. Black Sun, the Pikes, even the remnants of Crimson Dawn, once his own criminal empire, bowed before him once more, and in the deepest void of the Outer Rim, Maul gathered the Imperial remnants, forging them into something greater. An army. a force capable of toppling the New Republic. Maul's war was no mere rebellion. It was a calculated purge of the New Republic's influence in the Outer Rim. From the moment he emerged, he struck with ruthless efficiency, targeting vulnerable trade routes, remote Republic outposts, and key supply chains. The Outer Rim, which had long been neglected by the Republic in favor of rebuilding the core worlds, now found itself at the mercy of a phantom from the past. His forces were many. The warlords who once scrapped over the Empire's remains had sworn allegiance to him or died. The Shadow Collective and the Empire were reforged into a single, cohesive power under his iron will. And Maul did not wage war as the Empire had. There was no bureaucracy, no politics, only conquest. Entire planets fell without warning. His fleet, a patchwork of star destroyers, Mandalorian warships, and pirate vessels, emerged from hyperspace like a specter of death. Cities burned, garrisons were executed, and those who resisted were slaughtered without mercy. The message was clear. The New Republic was weak. The Sith had returned. Maul had not forgotten the Jedi. He knew they would come, seeking to stop him, and so he set a trap. On the planet Belsavis, a once-secret Republic prison world, Maul's forces stormed the stronghold, releasing hundreds of war criminals, mercenaries, and former Sith loyalists into his growing ranks. The New Republic dispatched a strike team to liberate the planet. They never returned. Maul made sure their deaths were public. Their bodies were nailed to the walls of the burning prison, and transmitted across the HoloNet as a warning. The Republic hesitated. Fear spread. That was when Luke Skywalker stepped forward. The Force had whispered to Luke of Maul's return long before the reports came flooding in. He had seen visions of burning cities, of battlefields soaked in blood, of a crimson saber cutting through innocence like a scythe through wheat. And he had felt something else. A darkness long thought buried. Leia, standing before the Republic Senate, argued for immediate action. "We cannot allow this monster to rise again," she urged. "If we wait, we will be fighting a war we cannot afford." Many senators still feared war. They remembered the Empire too well. Luke, however, knew better. Maul was a predator. If they did not hunt him now, he would only grow stronger. So, Luke left Coruscant. The chase was long. Maul's forces were ghosts, always moving, never staying in one place. By the time Luke arrived at a planet under attack, Maul was already gone, leaving behind only ruins and the stench of death. On Corellia, he found Republic officers impaled on city walls, their blood painting messages in an ancient Sith language. On Ryloth, he walked through the charred remains of a Twi'lek village, where Maul's men had set fire to homes filled with screaming families. On Ord Mantell, he fought against Maul's lieutenants, barely escaping an ambush set specifically for him. Everywhere Luke went, he saw Maul's influence growing. And then, finally, he found him. A once thriving Republic shipyard now lay in ruins, its skeletal remains drifting in orbit like a graveyard. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal, the sound of distant explosions echoing through the vast industrial wasteland. And there, at the heart of the wreckage, stood Maul. His hooded figure was illuminated by the crimson glow of his twin lightsaber. Luke emerged from the shadows, his presence calm but unwavering. "So the Jedi finally come," Maul sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You took longer than I expected." Luke studied him carefully. Despite the years, Maul was still a warrior. His stance, his grip on his saber, the fire in his yellow eyes. He was still the same relentless monster who had plagued the Jedi. "I'm here to end this," Luke said simply. Maul laughed. "You sound like Kenobi." There was no more talking. Maul ignited his saber, and the battle began. The Sith moved first, leaping through the air in a blinding blur of motion. His saber spun like a cyclone, striking with ferocious speed. Luke barely had time to raise his own weapon, meeting the attack head-on. Sparks flew as the two warriors clashed, the air crackling with raw energy. Maul was relentless. His strikes came from every direction, low sweeps, rapid thrusts, unpredictable spins. He moved with the precision of a master, his blade an extension of his fury. Luke countered with controlled efficiency, his footwork flawless, his defense impenetrable. He did not attack recklessly. He waited, reading Maul's movements, looking for an opening. Then he found it. Maul overextended, his saber slicing just inches too far. Luke struck. His blade grazed Maul's shoulder, burning through the Sith's armor. Maul howled, retreating a step, but his anger only grew. "You're good," he admitted, "but you still lack the true power of the dark side." With a surge of energy, Maul slammed his hand into the ground. The force rippled outward in a shockwave, sending Luke flying backward. Maul lunged, his saber aimed for Luke's heart. Luke twisted mid-air, barely avoiding the strike. He landed in a roll, coming to his feet instantly. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled his saber forward. Maul dodged, just barely. The blue blade seared the side of his ribs. Snarling, he launched a counterattack, his strikes faster, more erratic. The fight turned into a blur of red and blue, each warrior pushing the other to the limit. But Luke was gaining the upper hand. Maul felt it. For the first time in years, he felt fear. His strikes became desperate, his precision slipping. And then Luke's saber came down, disarming him. Maul's weapon tumbled to the ground. Luke stood over him, his saber pointed at the Sith's throat. "Your war is over," Luke said. Maul's lips curled into a grin. "You underestimate me." Before Luke could react, Maul unleashed a massive force push, sending Luke flying backward. In the same motion, he summoned his fallen saber and vanished into the shadows. By the time Luke regained his footing, Maul was gone. Maul sat in his ship, his body still aching from the duel. He had lost this battle, but the war was far from over. Then, a whisper in the dark, a voice he had not heard in years. "Return to me, my apprentice." Maul's breath caught in his throat. Sidious. His master still lived. A cold smile crept across his face as he adjusted his ship's course. To the unknown regions. To Exegol. What if Maul exposed Palpatine as Darth Sidious to the Jedi Council? The desert winds howled across the crimson landscape of Malachor, sweeping through the ruins of an ancient Sith battleground. Here, deep within a temple long abandoned, Darth Maul sat in meditation. The dark side flowed around him, whispering secrets of power and vengeance. But this time, the Force showed him something else. A shadow. A greater darkness lurking just beyond his reach. Maul's yellow eyes snapped open, and he bared his teeth. He had spent his entire life in pursuit of vengeance against the Jedi, against Kenobi, against all who had wronged him. But now, the Force made something clear. Sidious. The true enemy was not the Jedi. It was the Master who had cast him aside. Rising to his feet, Maul reached for his communicator. There was only one person he could go to. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi had barely finished sparring with Anakin in the training halls when the message arrived. A secure channel. A voice he had not heard in years. Maul. Kenobi, the voice rasped. "We must speak. There is little time." Kenobi's first instinct was suspicion. But then Maul said something unexpected. "The Sith Lord who commands Dooku, the true mastermind of this war. It is Chancellor Palpatine. Kenobi's breath caught in his throat. It was an absurd claim. But then, he remembered something. Dooku had said the same thing. Back when he was captured on Geonosis, Dooku had tried to convince him that a Sith Lord controlled the Republic. He had dismissed it as deception. Now Maul, a sworn enemy, repeated the same words. And if there was one thing Kenobi knew about Maul, it was that he was obsessed with revenge. But this was not about revenge. This was truth. Kenobi wasted no time. He went straight to Master Yoda. The Jedi High Council chamber was silent as Kenobi spoke. "This is the second time I have heard this claim," he said, standing before them. Once from Count Dooku, now from Maul. Mace Windu's expression was unreadable. Maul is a Sith. A deceiver. Perhaps, Kenobi admitted. But I sensed no deception in his voice. If he and Dooku both claim the same thing, then we must consider the possibility. Ki-Adi-Mundi frowned. If Palpatine is Sidious, if he has been orchestrating this war, then we are already in far greater danger than we realized. The room fell into deep contemplation. If they moved openly against Palpatine, the Republic would splinter. The war with the Separatists would turn into chaos. Billions could die in civil war. "We must act," Windu finally said, his voice firm. "But we must act wisely." The Council made their decision. They would not move against Palpatine directly. They would investigate him in secret. Kenobi was chosen as the lead investigator. He would be assisted by Jedi Masters Shok Ti, Plo Koon, and Luminara Unduli. But the Force had other plans. Meditation had always been Kenobi's guide. As he sat in the stillness of the Jedi Temple, seeking clarity, the Force whispered to him. It did not give him answers. It gave him a path. His vision darkened. He saw himself walking through ancient halls, descending into depths untouched for centuries. He saw shadows, lingering echoes of something buried long ago. The depths of the Jedi Temple. When he awoke, Kenobi wasted no time. Alongside Plo Koon and Shok Ti, he ventured deep into the temple's restricted underlevels. The further they descended, the more the air changed. It became heavier, charged with a presence unnatural to the Jedi. And then they found it. A great chamber, walls covered in Sith runes, the air thick with darkness. The Jedi Temple, Plo Koon murmured. It was built atop a Sith shrine, and in that moment they understood. This was how Sidious had remained hidden. The ancient Sith energies masked his presence, allowing him to stand in the light while ruling from the shadows. Kenobi wasted no time. He returned to Yoda, and they formed a plan. The royal palace of Theed was eerily silent. A dark storm gathered over the ancient city, thick with tension. Beneath the golden domes and regal spires, 6 Jedi Masters stood hidden within the grand chambers, their hands resting on their hilts, their senses sharpened. They had spent months uncovering the deception, years suspecting something dark lurked beneath the Chancellor's smile. Now, at last, they would move against Darth Sidious himself. Palpatine arrived dressed in his traditional red and black robes, his expression as measured as ever. The room had been prepared for a diplomatic meeting, or at least that was what he believed. The Queen of Naboo and several Republic officials stood at a distance, watching nervously. But as soon as Palpatine entered, the guards stepped aside, revealing the Jedi waiting for him. The door sealed shut. Master Mace Windu stepped forward, gripping his lightsaber tightly. "It's over, Sidious," Windu declared. For the first time, Palpatine's expression shifted. just slightly. Not into fear, not into surprise, but into amusement. "You're making a grave mistake, Master Jedi," he said, his voice eerily calm. Master Shock T raised her chin, her dark eyes narrowing. "The only mistake we made was allowing you to rule for this long." Palpatine let out a slow, raspy chuckle. "And yet, here you are, so certain of your righteousness. So blind." Master Kit Fisto drew his lightsaber. "We know who you are." Palpatine's lips curled upward. "Then you also know that your deaths were decided the moment you walked through that door." The room exploded into chaos. In an instant, Palpatine erupted into motion. His crimson blade ignited, cutting through the air with unnatural speed. Before the Jedi could react, he lunged, his first strike aimed directly at Sassy Teen. Sassy Teen never had a chance. Sidious was a storm, his blade moving in blurs of red. Before Teen could even react, Palpatine's lightsaber pierced his chest, burning through his heart. The Iktochi Master let out a strangled gasp before crumpling, lifeless. But Sidious was already moving. Kit Fisto and Shock T lunged at him together, their blades swinging in synchronized strikes. Fisto's green blade sizzled against red, while Shock T, with her graceful Makoshi style, aimed for precise counterattacks. Sidious laughed. He battered aside their strikes with inhuman speed. Then, in a flash, he spun, his cloak billowing. His blade slashed across Kit Fisto's stomach. The Nautolan staggered, his green face twisted in shock as he fell to his knees. Before he could react, Sidious beheaded him in one swift motion. Shock T gasped, stepping back. Luminara Unduli and Mace Windu charged. Luminara's precision strikes came fast and relentless, her green blade dancing in sharp, calculated arcs. But Sidious was too fast. With a dark snarl, he ducked under her next swing and thrust his blade into her gut. She gasped in agony, her body stiffening as the Sith Lord twisted the saber before tearing it free. She collapsed, her dark robes pooling around her as her life faded. Shock T was now alone against Sidious, her blue eyes wide with horror. For a moment, she hesitated, and that was her downfall. Sidious unleashed a sudden blast of Force lightning, hurling her against the wall. The impact shattered stone, and she crumpled with a pained cry. She tried to stand, tried to lift her saber, but Sidious was upon her. He plunged his blade into her chest. Shock T, warrior of Felucia, fell without another word. Mace Windu was next. He and Sidious locked eyes, and then they clashed. Windu's purple blade crashed against red, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Vopad met the darkness of the Sith. The two combatants became blurs, their sabers striking faster than the human eye could track. Windu's mastery of Vopad allowed him to channel Sidious's hatred against him, turning his strength into his own. For the first time in decades, Palpatine was being pushed back. With a roar, Windu struck, his blade carving through Sidious's defenses, forcing him toward the edge of the room. But Sidious had one final trick. His yellow eyes flashed with power. With a snarl, he unleashed a wave of dark side energy, shattering the windows, sending Windu flying. The Jedi Master crashed hard against the floor, his saber tumbling away. Sidious stood over him, lightning crackling in his fingertips. "You fool," he hissed. "The dark side is eternal." He raised his hand, but before he could strike, Yoda pushed him back with the Force. Sidious realized he had to flee. With a final sneer, he leapt into the air, vanishing into the shadows. While the Republic mourned, Maul struck. With the Jedi and Senate paralyzed by the assassination of half the Council, The Shadow Collective launched a full-scale invasion across the Outer Rim. He unleashed his forces on Ryloth, cutting through Republic garrisons with Mandalorian warriors at his side. He took Mon Colla, severing the Republic's naval supply chains. One by one, key Separatist and Republic worlds fell to his armies. The Republic, without the Jedi to guide them, was crippled. By the time they even realized what had happened, Maul controlled nearly half the galaxy. And he was not done. The war-torn skies of Sereno were filled with fire as a lone shuttle descended onto the Separatist stronghold. Palpatine, cloaked in black, stepped onto the landing platform. The war was crumbling, and Darth Maul was rising. But Palpatine did not rage. He smiled. He would let Maul have his moment of power, and then he would take everything from him. What if Darth Maul became an Inquisitor? The screams of Maul echoed through the dungeons of Coruscant. Bound in chains of Sith alchemy, Maul convulsed as another wave of lightning coursed through his ruined body. His cybernetic legs sparked, his muscles seized, but still he refused to break. From the shadows, Darth Sidious watched. "You disappoint me, apprentice," the Dark Lord murmured. His voice was soft, almost mocking. Maul gasped for breath. His body slumped against the cold floor. You are nothing," Maul spat, his yellow eyes burning with hatred. "You cast me aside, and yet you fear me enough to keep me alive?" Sidious only smiled. Then, with a wave of his hand, he unleashed another torrent of pain. Maul's body arched, his broken mind shattering further. 4 months, this torment continued. The days and nights blurred into endless agony. Sidious was patient. He took his time, warping Maul's spirit, breaking him in ways worse than death. When the Republic fell, when the Jedi were exterminated, when Sidious crowned himself Emperor, Maul was no longer the warrior who once defied him. He was something else. Something hollow. A shadow of his former self. And when Sidious introduced his new project, the Inquisitorius, Maul was the first to be inducted. As the Grand Inquisitor. Few dared to whisper his name. The Inquisitors, Sith-trained Jedi hunters, were brutal, but even among them, there was one whose presence alone sent fear racing through their bones. The Grand Inquisitor. Maul wore dark crimson armor, his dual-bladed saber igniting with a whisper of death. He led purges across the Outer Rim, hunting down Jedi who had managed to escape the Great Purge. He butchered hundreds. Jedi Knights, Temple survivors, Padawans, even the younglings who had hidden in the ruins of their lost order. None survived. And yet, despite his power, he was never free. Because Darth Vader watched him, waiting, testing, breaking him all over again. "You wish to overthrow me." Darth Vader's voice was as cold as the vacuum of space. The chamber aboard the Fortress Inquisitorius was silent, save for the flickering of red and white lights. The other Inquisitors stood in a circle, watching like predators waiting for the kill. Maul stood before Vader, his twin blades ignited, his breathing heavy. He had plotted against Vader for months. He had whispered to the other Inquisitors, sowed seeds of doubt, of rebellion. But Vader had known all along. "You are weak, Maul," Vader continued. "You were always weak." Then he attacked. It was over in seconds. Maul barely had time to react before Vader was upon him. A storm of black and crimson, unstoppable. Their sabers clashed, but Maul could feel it. Vader was stronger. Maul tried to counter, spinning his saber staff in a wide arc, but Vader was faster. His blade came down like an executioner's axe, cutting clean through Maul's metal legs. Maul collapsed, his body hitting the cold durasteel. Pain surged through him as his severed limbs clattered to the floor, sparks flying. The Inquisitors watched in silence. Vader loomed over him. Then, he extended his hand. Using the Force, Vader dragged Maul's broken form through the chamber, like a discarded corpse, before slamming him against the wall. "This was your lesson," Vader said. Then he turned and left, his black cape billowing behind him. The Inquisitors laughed, and for the first time since his capture, Maul felt truly broken. The galaxy whispered his name in fear. Maul had embraced his new identity. He was no longer the Sith Lord who had once dreamed of ruling, nor the desperate outcast clawing his way back to power. He was a hunter now, a nightmare given form, and across the void of space, the Jedi who had survived Order 66 would come to know him as their executioner. His first target was Arda 7, a forest-covered outer rim world where remnants of a Jedi enclave had taken refuge. The survivors, Jedi Knights, Padawans, and refugees who had hidden in the shadows since the fall of the Republic, had thought themselves safe. They had built a small community, forging new lives among the trees and rivers. Maul arrived under the cover of night, leading a squad of Inquisitors and Purge troopers. He did not strike immediately. No, he watched, studied, let the scent of their fear grow thick in the air. Then, like a storm, he descended. His double-bladed lightsaber ignited, casting red reflections against the trees as he ripped through the first line of defenders. Jedi Knights surged forward, but they were nothing to him. Their blades clashed against his own, but their strikes were predictable, weak, hesitant, the blows of survivors, not warriors. One Jedi, a Togruta Knight, lunged at him. Maul caught her blade in mid-air, twisting his saber in a deadly arc that severed her arm. She barely had time to scream before he impaled her through the chest, watching the light fade from her eyes with something close to satisfaction. Padawans tried to flee. Maul hunted them down. He followed a trio of them into the village, cutting them down one by one as they sobbed and begged for mercy. He gave them none. He found a hidden bunker where Jedi had hidden families and younglings, the last remnants of their lineages. Maul slaughtered them all. Fathers, mothers, children. He let the screams echo through the night, carving a message into the trees with his saber. There is no refuge, only death. By sunrise, the enclave was nothing but ash and silence. 4 years, Maul repeated this ritual across the galaxy. Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Saleucami, Ilum. Each world became a tomb. Jedi temples and hidden sanctuaries were turned to ruins, their defenders broken beneath Maul's blade. He took pleasure in their desperation, in the way hope drained from their eyes when they realized they were doomed. He left behind mass graves and smoldering cities, ensuring that the few survivors would carry the legend of the Grand Inquisitor across the stars. The Jedi were not the only ones to suffer. Maul targeted entire populations who harbored Force-sensitive individuals. He ordered entire villages razed, their people executed for their crimes. He oversaw the bombardment of monasteries and sacred sites, places that had once been strongholds of knowledge and peace. His reputation eclipsed that of the other Inquisitors. Even the Emperor took notice. And yet, Maul was not satisfied. The fortress Inquisitorius trembled under his presence. Maul ruled the Inquisitors through terror. He did not train them as equals. He saw them as tools, weapons to be wielded and discarded when they no longer served their purpose. Those who failed in their hunts faced punishment beyond imagination. Some were executed outright. Others were subjected to months of torment, their bodies broken, their minds shattered, until only fear remained. And then there was Reva. Maul had long sensed her treacherous nature. She was ambitious, arrogant, and worst of all, filled with doubt. She still clung to something, a flicker of defiance buried deep beneath her hatred. He would snuff it out. He summoned her before the assembled Inquisitors, the dark chamber illuminated only by the crimson glow of the torches lining the walls. "Kneel." Reva hesitated, her jaw clenched. Maul smirked. "Ah. You still believe yourself different. Special." His voice was mocking, laced with cruel amusement. "But you are nothing. You have always been nothing." Reva's fists tightened. The tension in the room thickened. "Prove yourself," Maul whispered, stepping closer. "Strike me down." The room erupted in silence. Reva's breath hitched, but she did not hesitate. With a snarl, she ignited her blade, lunging at Maul with all her strength. She never stood a chance. With a single, precise twist of his wrist, Maul disarmed her, sending her saber spinning across the chamber. She barely had time to react before he gripped her by the throat, lifting her into the air as she gasped and clawed at his grip. "You see," he whispered, leaning in close. "Weak." Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he plunged his saber through her chest. Reva choked, her body convulsing, her eyes wide in horror as she looked at her fellow Inquisitors, none of whom moved to help. He let her body fall to the floor, lifeless. "She was an example," Maul said, turning to face the others. "Remember this lesson." None dared to challenge him again. Not all Jedi were so easily hunted. The next target was Ezra Bridger and Kanan Jarrus. The Grand Inquisitor led an armada to the Lothal system, tracking the Ghost crew to an abandoned Imperial facility. He descended alone, prowling the dark corridors like a predator as he hunted his prey. When he finally found them, Ezra and Kanan stood ready, their blue blades ignited. "You will die screaming," Maul hissed, twirling his dual-bladed saber as he advanced. The battle was ferocious. Kanan fought defensively, his mastery of Sorisu keeping him alive against Maul's relentless attacks. Ezra was reckless, his wild strikes lacking refinement, but Maul toyed with them both, testing their limits. He drove them back, cutting close, landing shallow strikes meant to wound, not kill. He wanted them broken first. Then, as he prepared for the final blow, the Ghost roared overhead, its cannons blasting the facility apart. Kanan and Ezra vanished in the chaos, barely escaping aboard their ship as the structure collapsed around Maul. For the first time in years, the Grand Inquisitor had been denied his kill. But not for long. Maul stood in the flames, watching the ship disappear into the stars. Next time, there would be no escape. 4 years, Maul led the bloodiest purges in the Empire's history. No longer did he seek freedom. No longer did he seek power. He had become a weapon, a tool of the Empire, until, one day, his final mission came. Tatooine, a desolate world of sand and ruin. The final Jedi target. Maul stepped off his Imperial shuttle, his red eyes burning with hunger. The whispers of the dark side led him here, to the one Jedi who had eluded the Empire's grasp for over a decade. Kenobi. Maul had dreamt of this moment. 4 years, he had imagined torturing Kenobi, making him suffer as he had suffered. And yet, when he found him, something was different. Kenobi stood alone in the desert, his face calm. Maul sneered. "You hide in the sands like a rat." Kenobi did not answer. Maul ignited his saber. Kenobi still did not move. For a moment, something in Maul hesitated. This was different from their past battles. Different from the rage-fueled clashes of the Clone Wars. Kenobi had changed. And before Maul could even process what was happening, it was over. Maul lunged. Kenobi moved once. One single stroke. A flash of blue. And then Maul froze, his saber staff clattering to the ground. He gasped. Looked down. Kenobi had cut straight through his chest. Maul staggered, falling to his knees in the desert sand. The twin suns shimmered in the sky above him. For a long moment, there was silence. Maul coughed, his vision blurring. His body was failing him. Kenobi knelt beside him. For the first time, Maul's voice was quiet. "Is he the chosen one?" Kenobi's eyes softened. "He is." Maul let out a slow, shaking breath. Then, for the first time in his long, tormented life, he felt peace. His body fell still. And Darth Maul, once a Sith, once a warrior, once a nightmare, was no more. Obi-Wan stood in silence, gazing at Maul's lifeless form. The wind carried the sands over his fallen foe, burying him in the desert. And with that, the last remnant of the Sith's past was gone. Obi-Wan turned and disappeared into the dunes. A new hope awaited. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.